So, Céad Míle Fáilte to DRS2018 at University of Limerick, on behalf of our host University of Limerick and Limerick School of Art and Design. Myself, Keelin, Leahy and Muireann McMahon, co-chairs, warmly welcome you to the sunny campus of University of Limerick. You can transform your umbrellas to parasols for the week. It's been a little over 2 years since we played with the idea of hosting DRS 2018. Ever since we've been planning DRS 2018, and it has finally landed, with nearly 600 delegates arriving on campus from over 43 different countries. Peter Lloyd initially daunted us with the thought of hosting a conference with 400 delegates. But of course, being competitive and wanting to beat the 2016 DRS English team, along with your support, we've achieved this challenge. So thank you for supporting the Irish team. Historically, Limerick is known for its industrial tradition. Fortunately, things are changing, and along with other initiatives, DRS 2018 has contributed towards this. DRS 2018 aims to be a positive catalyst for change. We have put together an exciting but busy programme of academic and social activities that will engage, inform, and maybe even provoke. It could not have happened without the support of our two institutions, University of Limerick and the School of Art and Design. Progressively over the past 2 years, we have continually received a considerable amount of support and help from some very important people. We would like to thank all of the local organised committee from UL and LSAD, and we even managed to rope in other institutions such as Cork Institute of Technology, Dún Laoghaire Institute of Art and Design, Loughborough Design School, so many thanks to those institutions. It really has been a collective effort, and it's like the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. We'd also like to thank Deborah and her conference management team, who are working furiously behind the scene all week to make sure things run smoothly, and maybe even too smoothly with the drinking of the wine last night. We ran out. To the super student volunteers, they're visible through their colourful t-shirts. They're here to bring ease to your conference experience, so please do approach them if you have any queries. In addition, we've been very fortunate in accessing the creative talents of the UL and LSAD students who developed the DRS identity concept. They also developed the animations that you saw at the entrance, and even the lecterns across here. So these are all developed by our students between the UL and LSAD campuses. Thank you also to the Design Research Society Council, especially Peter and Eric, for their continued help and support in organising this conference. Thank you to PhD by Design for bringing the first PhD by Design event to Limerick. Yesterday was a huge success in LSAD, and that event will continue at the Hub in the Chemie Business School throughout the week. You may have seen there's a leaflet on all your chairs, and on that is basically a call for contributions, which the PhD by Design group will run throughout the week, so hopefully you can contribute towards that. Thank you to our sponsors and our partners for their support. These include Bank of Ireland, Centre for Excellence in Universal Design, Design Partners, and Fáilte Art Ireland, as well as our own institutions who provide the space, support, and our time. It's a very daunting task, but an exciting task, to entertain 600 guests at the first design research event in Limerick. Now, Muireann will run through the social activities, which we hope will entertain you. Thank you.
So we have quite a lot happening over the next 3 days, and that we really hope that you take part in as much of it as you possibly can. But one of my colleagues compared this to a music festival, and like all good music festivals, you have to make choices and decide what you want to see and what you might miss. But just one piece of advice, while the big headliners might draw the crowds, sometimes it's the small up-and-coming breakthrough acts that will really blow your minds. So keep that in mind when you're choosing who you want to see and when. So as much as we've planned all of these activities as well, what we really want to happen during the networking, during the breaks, during the social activities is, I suppose, chances, happenstances, interactions, occurrences, and maybe even arguments that will really help move the whole debate around design research forward and maybe introduce it into completely new directions. Also, We want to just note that at the University of Limerick we have an ethos of dignity and respect, and we have a code of conduct for the DRS2018 that is on our website. So we hope you all adhere to it, and we don't think we even need to really ask. So to make things easier for you, each morning we're going to run through the social activities that are going to be happening during and in the evening, during the day and in the evening, just to let you gauge how much energy you should conserve for the evening activities. So today we have 2, so take it easy until about 6 o'clock. So the first is going to be the Best of Emerging Irish Design exhibition that's opening at 6 p.m. in the Product Design Studios in the basement of this building here. So we invite you all to come along, take a look at pieces of work from the graduates from institutions across all of the country of Ireland. And it's really exciting because this is the first time we've ever had an event like this in Ireland. We hope it's going to be the first of many. So I'm going to be expecting a volunteer from another academic institution later on today, so I can see all my delegates from Ireland carrying in their seats. Don't worry, we'll get you. So that's opening at 6 p.m. and there'll be drinks reception there for you to take around and peruse the exhibits. And just a note as well, all of those graduates are for hire if anybody's looking for some really, really good designers. And then our second activity, you can hightail it into the city centre. We're hosting the Institute of Designers in Ireland Bread and Butter Design Social, and that's in 1314 at Jerry Flannery's Bar. You can Google it. It's quite a prominent bar in Limerick, so you can't miss it. And that's where you're going to hear some professional designers who are working in Limerick and in the region talk about how they earn their crust. And again, it's a really good opportunity to mix and to meet some designers who are practicing in Ireland. And so also, just to caution, that's a ticketed event and the venue is limited in capacity. So if you haven't gotten your tickets, I'd advise you to get them now. They're on Eventbrite, it's free, but there's only 200 of them. But for those of you that don't get tickets, there's a bar out the front of that as well, so you can create your own social there. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage Professor Kirsten May. And Kirsten May is the Vice President of the University of Limerick, and she's going to invite you and welcome you to DRS 2018. Thank you, Kirsten.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many of you at this kind of early hour of the day here in the University of Limerick Concert Hall. I would like to thank Keelin, Muireann, and also Deborah for organizing the conference alongside the organizing committee. And it's absolutely fabulous to be here today at the opening of the Design Research International Conference. I would like to extend our welcome to the members of the Design Research Council and also to all of the participants here today and those who will join the conference later. At a time of unprecedented, wide-ranging and profound societal and environmental changes, the importance of design as a strategic thinking catalyst and a tool of innovation cannot be underestimated. And we are very honored and proud that the Design Research Society's International Conference has come to Limerick and is being co-hosted by the university here. In fact, this is the first and largest international design research conference ever to be held in Ireland. We are very aware that this gathering of design researchers and practitioners and the work of the Design Research Society plays a very significant role in shaping the agenda for inquiries in and through design. It catalyzes cross-disciplinary exchange, collaborations, and explorations. It stimulates critical and creative intervention and approaches to design education, as well as it informs wider policy making. I also hope that co-hosting the conference will help to establish the University of Limerick as a center of excellence for design research and practice. As a civic and research-led university, we are committed to working both in and with our local and the wider communities, as well as building on our substantial and significant relationships with industries, businesses, and statutory bodies in the region and further afield. Design as a pervasive practice and shaping force of values and relationships plays a vital part in nurturing, sustaining, and expanding the interactions with partners in the region, on the island of Ireland, and internationally. We are therefore looking forward to developing more vibrant connections between our own design researchers and practitioners and their international counterparts for future collaborations. Design is much more than the interplay between form and function. It is a fundamental human activity that determines how ideas become reality. Design processes put the human at the center. Design shapes, enhances, and can fundamentally change how we grasp reality, how we interact with the world around us and with each other. It is one of those extraordinary fields of human activity that comes to life when it interacts with other areas and disciplines. And it is therefore not only impacted by the changes in science, technology, business, and human thought, but drives the development of both established and new fields of knowledge and understanding, of practices and competencies, and last but not least, of ethical considerations and value hierarchies. Design is as vibrant as much as it is a complex disciplinary field. It strives not only through the rational identification of problems and the cultivation of analytic assessment. Problem solving relies much more on the fostering of our imagination, on probing and speculating, on play and improvisation, on lateral thinking and on sharing the ideas and insights with others in order to challenge existing approaches and explore alternative possibilities. It involves, very importantly, sensory perception and embodied experience, horizon scanning and system thinking, process development and risk-taking. Design generates and develops new ways of thinking and making in tandem with advancing and improving technological application, infrastructures, business models, and customer experiences. Contemporary design lies at the heart of the digital transformation of society. It is in high demand to harness the possibilities opened up by big data, the power of the algorithm, nanomaterials, genomics, to name but a few. It shapes biomedical devices, connected technologies, finance, food, health and well-being, consumer products, service systems, and business processes, and much more. Both Ireland and the EU recognize design as a key driver of user-centered innovation, as it combines creativity, technological and non-technological innovation to improve the quality of life for people. The School of Design at the University of Limerick is involved in many of these areas, and we have great ambitions for its future development. As I mentioned before, design cannot exist in a bubble. The emerging design industry and research community in Ireland must connect with the wider global design community and encourage new partnerships, new projects, and new design solutions. Progress so far has been extremely promising. The design sector in Ireland is getting stronger, accounting for 38 billion euros in export, which equates to 20% of total Irish exports between 2011 and 2014, with over 48,000 people employed in design roles and 80 to 90% of firms citing design as a key contributor to innovation, customer service, and profit. The importance of design cannot be overstated. Design in an innovation context has also been identified as a strategic aspect of moving Ireland's research and development capacity forward and up the value chain of innovation and entrepreneurship. And that's extremely important for this region here, I would like to emphasize. This also draws attention to how we best educate and support future design practitioners and researchers with agency. And that also includes the PhD by design, which you are debating here at the conference. The DRS2018 conference offers a pertinent platform to explore design as a catalyst for change and to map out the agenda for future development. And with its very rich program on offer, I'm sure much opportunity will be had for critical debate, provocations, sharing, and learning. And I wish you all the success. I know that this kind of event only comes into being with great effort and dedication on part of the local organizing committee. And I would like to congratulate all 19 members of the committee here, and I would like to give particular mention to Keelin, Leahy and Muireann McMahon, who are chairing the conference. And I also, as you heard, would like to thank our student volunteers to support the event. In closing, I just want to wish you all the very best for the next few days, and enjoy the sun, have fun, and have lots of provoking debates. And with that, I hand over to Keelin. Thank you.
We'll now have Peter Lloyd, Vice Chair for the Design Research Society.
Morning, everyone. On behalf of the Design Research Society Council, I'd like to welcome you all to Limerick and to our biennial DRS conference. It's great to see so many people here and how popular this event's been. Since 2016, the Design Research Society as an organisation has begun to modernise and develop. And we hope that has become evident to those of you that are members of the Society through our communications and our recent change in strategy. We're becoming more transparent and collaborative in what we do, and we'd like to involve more people and more diverse people in shaping its future and contributing to international conferences such as this. It's a very big collective effort, and the more people that are involved, the stronger these events are. So the conference theme of Catalysts is well chosen. We hope to start discussions about our future here and strengthen what we have already achieved. If you would like to get involved, please join us at a special session on Thursday to help co-design the future of the DRS. We very much want to get people involved in shaping the future of the society, shaping the future of the design research field. As has already been mentioned, the conference has been a huge collective effort between the DRS, the University of Limerick, School of Art and Design, Limerick Institute of Technology, and it's taken 2 years of organisation since the last conference. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes, and this is the fruits of all that labour. The commitment from the conference team, chaired by Maureen McMahon and Keelin Leahy, has been absolutely immense. And thanks are also due to Cristiano Storni. Many of you will know his name in many email communications. Thanks to him for chairing the programme committee so tirelessly and skillfully. And thanks to all the Limerick team who have worked so hard in designing what looks to be an excellent conference, taking on familiar DRS formats and adding some new twists too. So I hope everyone has a great conference. As in previous conferences, be critical but respectful of each other. And I hope to talk to as many of you as I can over the forthcoming days. So please enjoy the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. So now I'm just going to cover the academic events that will run over the next 3 days. So we have 3 main formats. The paper presentations, as you all know, were chaired by Cristiano Storni, so many thanks to Cristiano. The conversations were chaired by Sharon Prendeville, and the workshops were chaired by Louise Kiernan, so all on campus, so many thanks to those. There may be hiccups across the 3 days, but please take a positive Irish attitude and just say Asher to be grand. So please ensure that you enjoy the event. We hope that these 3 formats will engage design as a catalyst for change. Each day, the academic content will kick off with a keynote debate. And we have 3 topics that we think will catalyse the discussions. Muireann now would introduce our first keynote debate. Thank you.
So our first keynote debate is Design Research and Industry Impacts, and it's chaired by Professor Alex Milton. Just to give you a little bit of background on Alex, Alex is a professor and head of the School of Design at the National College of Art and Design in Dublin, having returned to the institution after taking a sabbatical in which, as the programme director for the Irish Year of Design 2015, he successfully devised and delivered a government-backed programme that attracted 1.7 million exhibition attendees, we wish, and established a platform for the continued development of design in Ireland. As a designer, curator, author and academic, Alex has advocated for the pivotal role of design, be that through public engagement, cultural interventions, curriculum innovation or policy development. He has curated major design exhibitions across the globe, including Liminal, Irish Design on the Threshold, shown in Milan, New York, Eindhoven and Dublin, as well as developing exhibitions with the V&A, Design Museum London and Vitra Design Museum. He's written a number of books, including Product Design, Lawrence King 2011, and Research Methods for Product Design, Lawrence King 2013. His most recent book, Irish Design 2015, Making Design Matter, was published in December 2016. A former head of design and applied arts at Edinburgh College of Art, he has taught and managed at institutions across the globe, including Heriot-Watt University, Edinburgh Napier University, University of Dundee, Central St. Martin's, and the Central Academy of Fine Art in Beijing. He has been a visiting professor at Manchester Metropolitan University and Aston University, and was Director of Design Research at University College Dublin. So, Alex, as you can see, has a big history and legacy behind him. So he's going to moderate the debate for us. But I want to get you involved as the audience as well. So this is probably the one and only time in the concert hall you'll be asked to not switch off your phones. You can mute them, but keep them on. So we're going to use a platform called Slido, which is very, very simple to use. You just log on to www.sli.do. So you just log on there. You insert the hashtag DRS2018, and you can pose your questions to the panel up here, and they'll come through to Alex and he'll pose them to the team. So you can be anonymous or you can put your name on it. It's entirely up to you, but we would like you to get involved as much as possible in the debate to make it a lively and interactive one, and for you as the audience to really engage and challenge the panel that's in front of you. So before we hand over to Alex, we'd just like to say Buin Tanavos DRS. Enjoy it, and we hope you have a really great week. Alex. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Muireann, for the introduction. That was very lengthy, and I don't think it probably deserved that. But what I'd like to do is just introduce our sort of keynote debaters to the stage. So Paul Rodgers from Lancaster University, Lorna Ross from Fjord Dublin, and Mariana Amatullo from Parsons School of Design at the New School. Okay, so I've got the pleasure of moderating today's keynote debate and introducing, as I say, and hopefully keeping on track this fantastic panel. The format for this morning is that each of the panels is going to give a short 10-minute presentation before we discuss some of the issues raised. And then, as Muireann said, we'll open up the questions from the floor using the Slido app. I think what with audience participation, the LED lighting, and the stalls, particularly the stalls, I do feel we're a little like we look like we're on a sort of Westlife comeback tour. So at certain moments, I expect Lorna to lead away and rise up and just project. So, but on a more serious note, this debate's been framed to explore the changing nature of design research and practice within academia and industry. It's clear, I think, even in some of the conversations yesterday at PhD by Design, that design is moving beyond merely being an instrumentalized tool for industry, and it's becoming an altruistic agent for and of change, and a force for social innovation. And I think that's something that Mariana is going to sort of cover. The role of design research and researchers within this world beyond is prompting a change of perspective from both academia and industry. And a new generation of designers are challenging the evolving role and nature of design research for both practice and industry. They're questioning whether design research is a tool or an agent for social and cultural change, or if it can be both. This debate is going to explore the changing nature and context of design research and practice. Hopefully it's going to point towards some of the implications of this change and how we can realise impact. We'll hopefully look at how we can support some of the new design research principles and emergent practices, and how design researchers can pursue new impactful research pathways that truly engage wider society. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Paul to start the series of presentations. Paul's going to reveal his personal research journey, and in particular his current role as the Arts and Humanities Research Council Leadership Fellow for Design in the UK, which is aiming to promote and stimulate design research and amplify its impact. So, thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Alex. So yeah, I've got the first bug already. My computer's just crashed. I've lost all my notes in mind. So yeah, it's a real privilege to be sitting here with Mariana and Lorna and yourself, Alex, and to try and kind of explore and discuss some of these issues, the kind of nexus of research and teaching and practice. So currently I hold two roles. I'm Professor in Design at Lancaster University in Imagination, which is a research-intensive centre. And I'm about halfway through a Design Leadership Fellowship, which is funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK. So we've been asked to contemplate the role of design research and whether design research is a tool for industry or an agent for social change, or both. And I think perhaps that's the kind of focal point of what we're going to be discussing this morning. I started my HRC Design Leadership Fellowship about 18 months ago. There's about another 18 months to run. I have a number of key aims. One of the aims is really to engender and strengthen the research capacity of the next generation of design researchers. And it's really kind of heartwarming to see so many of them here in the audience and continuing to kind of push at the kind of extremities through the PhD by design side of the Design Research Society. So I think we're in very good hands in terms of the next generation of design research. And again, I guess the caveat is that largely I'll be speaking from a UK perspective, but I think also internationally we have an amazing kind of set of early career PhD and design researchers across the world. Also, I'm looking to kind of increase the quality and quantity of design research. And I think we're already seeing that both of those kind of measures are increasing significantly. So in the last year, for example, between 2016 and 2017, in the UK, design applications increased by 96%. So that's a staggering amount in 1 year, and I think throws up even more challenges in quite a kind of, austere economic climate that we all face. So the title, if you like, of my Design Leadership Fellowship is Design Research for Change. So really it's about using design in all its guises, in all its definitions, in all its methodologies and conceptions to really enact positive change in society, be that socially, economically, culturally, environmentally, technologically, and in other ways. Recently, over about the last 6 or 8 months, I've been traveling all over the country. So yeah, you'll forgive my geography is appalling. So I'll try and remember where I've been. So we've held a number of what we've called next generation design research workshops all over the UK. So we've been to Belfast, Glasgow, Edinburgh, can't remember where that was, Manchester, Sheffield, Loughborough. Is that Loughborough? I'm not sure. The big dot in the middle, it's probably close enough. Probably covers about 4 counties, actually, that one. We've been to Cardiff, and we've held 3 in London. And the majority of these next generation design research workshops have been overly subscribed, in some cases heavily oversubscribed. Those 10 workshops have held, we've had over 800 design researchers sign up for that. And by design researchers, they are people that self-classify themselves as a design researcher. So it might be people like myself who's studied design, has kind of operated always within the kind of boundaries of design, but equally there are other people that are working in other disciplines like health and engineering, computer science, that now self-classify as design researchers. So to have 800 young, early career, next generation design researchers is a massive boost, I think, for the UK. And here are some of those 800 beavering away at one of the workshops, producing the next generation of design research that will take place in the UK and internationally. I guess I don't really need to talk too much about the value and the importance of design to a nation's economic and other kind of impact. So all I really want to highlight here is that almost £11 million an hour is generated by the creative industries in the UK, and design plays a massive kind of part in that creative industries package. And for example, the fashion industry, which is huge, and I think I might be right in saying that the fashion industry is now bigger than the car industry in the UK and employs almost 1 million people. in its kind of cognate areas. So that's a hugely important aspect of British society. So we see that design research methods, methodologies, tools, and approaches are found and used across a wide range of practices, specialisms, and activities. And I think taking Thackeray's quote here, that I think this speaks largely about design's move, the turn away from designers being seen solely as the creators of objects, to designers being seen now more as kind of facilitators, enablers, producers, activists within complex disciplinary contexts. So it talks of the designer as a producer, as a collaborator, a facilitator, enabler, a provocateur. But I think we as design researchers, we should also talk about design research now as being leaders. Significant leaders tackling some of the greatest problems that we face, both in the UK in a national context, but also in a global context. So designers as leaders is an important part. This graph shows where AHRC funded, and the Arts and Humanities Research Council are the main funders in the UK of design. So this is where those design projects reside. So the list on the right really kind of constitutes every conceivable department in a university. So from archaeology to dance, from geography to music, from psychology to even Irish studies. So there are design research projects in the UK that can be found in just about every conceivable university department. Design is everywhere. And again, if we look at, this is HRC's data, and if we bear in mind very strongly that the arts and humanities researchers, 35% of all active researchers in the UK are returned under the remit of AHRC, yet the AHRC only receive about 5% of the funding in the UK. So there is a significant balance there that we must all try and address. And this is where those design projects again reside, across the full spectrum and remit of the Arts and Humanities Research Council. Currently, we're looking at work where we are trying to map the activities and the themes and the issues that design researchers have taken on. So this is a picture from about 4 or 5 years ago. We're using the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals to provide a kind of loose conceptual framework of where that activity lies. And we can see that there's not much 4 or 5 years ago that are attempting to deal with those global challenges set by the UN. If we fast forward to a couple of years ago, we see much more activity. So people taking on and often leading massive, global, challenging, complex UN Sustainable Development Goals. And then if we look more recently, we can see that that's just increasing and increasing at an exponential rate. I'll give you a few examples. So we often, amongst these projects, we see design taking the lead. So designers working with health economists, computer scientists, and others to address significant health and well-being issues. We also find designers working with other leading researchers, so in this case, working with anthropologists, economists, business people, working on issues of work and significant economic growth. One example is a project that is looking to rehabilitate prisoners. It's looking to address the significant reoffending rates in the UK, again, using design as the central tool and methods and approaches to address that really challenging issue in the UK. That project is this one called Make Right. So a team of designers working with criminologists and others, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, work and produce these bags called Make Right bags. But it's not just about making bags, it's about developing educational systems. It's about trying to provide kind of entrepreneurial skills and other skills, manufacturing skills to the inmates so that when they leave prison, they can perhaps set up their own enterprise and kind of construct and fit back into society. Another example is a team of researchers, textile design-based researchers at Cardiff, working with fine artists, musicians, and computer scientists, again addressing the significant challenges that surround health and well-being and aging in the UK, particularly in the sphere of dementia. And here we see the design researchers taking a compassionate design approach, working with fairly advanced stages of dementia, developing a range of products and tools and activities, both for the people with dementia, their family, but also the care support workers. And lastly, this project, which received a meagre £200,000 of funding to develop an eco-material in Preston in Lancashire. This eco-material uses between 97 to 100% of waste material and converts that into a new material for domestic and other use. And this project has now transformed into a company based in Preston, employing 12 people, so providing massive social, cultural, and economic well-being to that region of the UK, which is perhaps sometimes overlooked. If you're in London in September, then we're having a Design Research for Change showcase at the London Design Festival in the Old Truman Brewery, just off Brick Lane, I believe. So please come along, say hello, and have a look yourself at some of the amazing design research that's going on in the UK, making significant social, cultural, and economic change. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Paul. So we're just going to pass on now to Lorna. And Lorna's had a fantastic sort of journey from fashion through design for health to her new role at Fjord within Accenture, based in a dock in Dublin. And Lorna's going to focus in particular on the role, importance, and changing nature of design research within, I suppose, a corporate context, but also a wider real-world context.
Sure. I'm going to stand over here so I can see my slides. Is that okay?
Of course.
Does that work?
Yeah.
I'm going to leave. Let's keep going. Because it's just really hard to turn. I'm a little bit intimidated because I'm not a design researcher. I'm a designer. But I think Alex tricked me into coming here. So I'm going to talk about, I guess it's, there's very little difference, and there's aspects of the work that I do and my team does that is clearly, overlapping with more traditional design research, if there's such a thing as traditional. So, I'm going to give you a journey through some of the work that we've done and a little bit of a kind of personal story. So, I've worked in design for about 28 years, and people often ask me, why design? Why is it important? What does it do? Why should we buy it? And I think more and more, it's just this idea that design, a bit like a science, it's a tool to understand as well as to act. And people who don't know a lot about design think about the traditional craft and the kind of making principles of design, but the kind of diagnostic tools in design are becoming more and more called for. A lot of industries are buying design and hiring design for the diagnostics, like how we unpack problems and how we consider complexity. So, we're clearly becoming more diagnostic in the things, but also then being able to act on top of that. So I used to teach the history of design, and you can kind of start to think about, why we make things. I mean, there's this really, Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. Humans are really inherently, we're so curious, and we build things. We don't evolve ourselves. We adapt our environment, to make it less hostile. So we're inherently builders, and the level of curiosity that we continue to build things and make things and design things as a way of resolving problems, but as a way of, also thinking about, we don't design for how we are, but how we wish to be. So again, when people say, why design? I say, when you think about innovation and you think about change and you think about the future, as was mentioned this morning, it's inherently aspirational and it's inherently optimistic. And there's very few disciplines that bring aspiration and optimism to a lot of the conversations, certainly currently. People are selling fear a lot, and I think design is inherently an optimistic discipline. It tries to make things better. It considers the future being better. We have a prize, Alex, for anyone who can identify this picture, right? No, we don't, but does anyone know what this is? Shout out. Yes, everyone in here knows this. So yeah, so this is the cooling suit for under the spacesuit. Okay, so Alex, that guy gets a beer. And it's just, this beautiful thing. It's craft, it's handmade, but it goes into space, and it's about us trying to, exist somewhere that's really hostile. And this relationship that design has in trying to build things that allow us become different and aspire to things. I made this map recently. It's not very accurate, but trying to talk about my own experience. I've worked for about 28 years in design. You start to think about, for so long, design came out of manufacturing and the Industrial Revolution and design for mass production. And then in the last 20 years, it kind of became more, design became more abstract, and it went from being really concrete, like making a teapot or making a car or a chair, to these abstract types of design, like service. I worked in like service design. And then, we're doing experience design now. Okay, we're doing like attention design. Okay, how do you keep attention? How do you get attention? How do you compete for attention? Data, right, that was mentioned already, we're in the data economy. And now there's a lot of conversations about reputation and trust economy. Brands that are gonna live and die based on reputation and trust. So how do you design for trust? I mean, we're being asked this right now. This is my career path. I started off designing knickers. It was very hard to do. Made them for pennies. But then I went to Motorola, designed like electronics when we had phones that were flip phones. Worked for the Department of Defense and did a lot of soldier equipment, ended up with some gaps, ended up at Mayo Clinic, and now I'm working in kind of emerging tech. And so, if I've lived this experience in my career, you can see how rapidly design is accelerating through all these different economies, and how much you have to reinvent yourself. Like, there's no one type of design anymore. I mean, I went from designing, like figuring out, where should I put that bow on the knicker? Should I put it on the side or on the front? To actually thinking about, AI systems and, synthetic personalities and how you design for those. This is something that, I think we've this has happened already, and I often think there's probably a third part to this. We used to try and figure out, design was about figuring out latent need. Do you remember when people used to say people don't know what they don't know, or they don't know what they want until they see it, but trying to figure out gaps and design things for those gaps. And then we became about trying to actually make people want things, and so really thinking about the stickiness of products and how products became adopted and used at scale. More and more, I think design, what we're noticing now, and this is because of a lot of our tools that we're outsourcing a lot of things that we used to do ourselves, is that change is often more evident in the absence of things. And so from an ethnographic perspective, we used to go around watching what people do and making notes and watching them, how they did things. And now we're paying attention to what they're stopping doing. And it's more important because so many of our tools are actually taking a lot of the tasks from us. I think in general, we're at this really interesting kind of pivot or kind of inflection point in design, and that the history of design for so long was based on the principles of assembly. And even from a design research perspective, it's like you walked towards a goal. It was this assembly model. You did certain things. They were progressive steps towards an end goal. And that came out of the Industrial Revolution, the principles of assembly, manufacturing models of design. Now we're getting into this, and this is a really dense slide, and I'll try and do it really fast. If you think about the original kind of attributes and characteristics of really great design, like the hero products, the beautiful chair, the notions of good design were based in uniformity and mass production. So I know I trained in this, where a good design was universally accessible. Everyone can use it. That's really good design. Make sure everyone can use it. Stable and predictable. Make sure that it's really stable in what it does. It's, it continues to serve. It doesn't fail at any point. It's a servant product. We made things that did things for other people, for humans. They were servants for us. That was branded by the creators. So the role of the kind of brand was really strong. And it was a commodity that you bought. Now we're moving into a really dynamic area of design where all of those things are not good design. They're irrelevant to design. We need to embrace this new idea of what's really good design is that we move to this really hyper-personalized experience. And so we don't want it to be universal. We want it to be unique and really individual. We don't want it to be stable. We want it to be really surprising and novel and constantly reinventing itself. We don't want it to be a servant. We want our services and products and design to be intelligent. We don't want branded by creator. We want it branded through association. And we don't want a commodity exchange. We want an experience supported. And so this is a massive shift. So if you've trained in design on the left, you're having to rethink all the characteristics of what we consider and evaluate as good design on the right. you see this a lot, right? When, Fjord, I work at Fjord, it was a design consultancy that was bought by Accenture. You need to give me a nod when I have to stop talking, okay? Because I actually don't know. 3 more minutes, okay, that's impossible. Fjord was bought by Accenture, and then it went from like 250 people to over 1,000 really fast. And what you see is that when you try and grow or accelerate design really fast, you break it. It essentially becomes the sameness. It's this whole idea that you start to revert back to norm. And this is really happening right now, is that design is becoming very commoditized in large corporations, and you're starting to see a lot of sameness in design. This is an innovation dilemma. It's also a design dilemma. Lots of stuff that we create, these artifacts, it's easier to describe a problem than to fix it. This is work from Mayo Clinic, and I felt like we were so good at making maps. And people were like service journey, journey maps and patient journey maps and blueprints and personas. And people were like intoxicated by this lovely visual stuff. I call it design pornography. And people were like, can I have that? Can I have that? And they're so good at describing the problem, but often they don't really help you fix anything. And so we get very distracted making these things. This is a good example, right? Beware the true, but useless. We do this all the time. We make things, and then we realize it didn't really help. So be very careful. Let's talk a bit about tech. 2 minutes? Still 3 minutes? So I work at Accenture. I work at the innovation. They have a big innovation lab up in Dublin, and it's called the DOC, and it's a lot around emerging tech. And so the role of design there is to really think about, it's kind of unlocking the transformative potential of technology. So technology by itself will do what it wants to do, but could end up being very meaningless. And so design's there to really think about its value to people. So we're seeing this, again, an inflection point in the relationship we have with our tools. For so long, we taught people how to understand and use technology. So if you remember, you start, when you train on a piece of software or a piece of technology or a computer, you don't know how to use it. You have to learn how to use it. Our tools have become so intelligent, we're now going to teach them how to understand us. So again, from a design perspective, we're not going to design UIs and clever interfaces and ways that people will use tools, because they're going to understand us. So the job is to design tools that understand what we need versus us understanding them. So we're working in, I'll run through this really quickly, but all the different kind of characteristics and attributes of artificial intelligence in terms of how they mimic what we already do and how they're going to mimic and understand us. Machines are users too. This is a big part of what we're also doing, is we're now, human-centered design. We're now doing machine-centered design. We're actually designing for machine-to-machine interaction. There's no human in the loop, but you're thinking about what the human ultimately wants the effect and impact to be. But we're thinking about, how do you design for machines talking to machines? AI is the new UI. So if you have a job, if you're a UI designer, you might want to learn about AI really quickly. We're morphing so fast that our ability to invent new things outpaces at the rate we can civilize them. I think we could have a really good conversation about the word civilize, but we don't have time. But I think it's a really interesting thing to think about civilizing our tools. The impact of impatience, we're seeing this, a huge social media is driving this kind of accelerated consumption. The needed now culture pushes spontaneous consumption. This is unsustainable levels. It's really being fed. With this come to me services, like the just-in-time come to me, people don't go looking for things anymore. And so algorithms were mentioned earlier on. So everyone's using algorithms to search. So this idea of serendipity and discovery is going away, and it's very, very dangerous for brands. People are letting go. I mentioned this earlier on. Discrete touch points. We won't be interacting with our tools in the way we traditionally did. So trust is the new battleground. And then post-human, the cyber psychology, the way we change is changing. We're really being shaped very differently by our tools. Age of distrust, we're looking at this a lot in terms of kind of counter cultures emerging through this whole kind of digital addiction and suspicion around digital addiction. We've got social cooling, digital detox, bubble hopping. Bubble hopping, anyone? Anyone heard of it? No? It's when you apparently intentionally do something that's really contrary to pattern behavior. So you actually take a step and you do something outside of, because you're aware that all these brands and services are tracking your behavior, and to try and be a little bit unpredictable, you do something that's called bubble hopping. Last 2 slides. this is what I'm seeing a lot, is that organizations put a lot of energy into exploring the future of technology, very little into exploring the future of humans. This is where you guys come in. And very few consider that likelihood that the future will be shaped by humans, not by technology. I'm going to skip that. I'll let you guys read that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lorna. Okay, and last but not least, Mariana is now going to sort of discuss some of her research at the intersection of design management and social innovation, and focus on the impact of design methodologies in the public sector. So thanks, Mariana.
Thank you. So I'm standing on the opposite side of the stage. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be back at the University of Limerick, and I want to say thank you to Muireann and the organizers for the warm Irish hospitality, and I'm looking forward to very exciting days ahead of conversation with you all. So Alex asked me to reflect a bit on this question of partnerships as they relate to design research and pedagogy and social innovation. And I thought I would do that through the multiple worlds I inhabit. So these days, my institutional home is Parsons at the new school, just for the last year. I don't know why this is coming up. And
Do you have a...
Yeah. So very, very fortunate to be part of Parsons and have joined a fearless community of faculty. Several of them are here, so I encourage you to seek them out this week. But the last 16 years or so, my trajectory in design education was really at Art Center, College of Design in Pasadena, where I was privileged to shape a social innovation division at the college and be part of many, many partnerships, over 100 partnerships through research, but also studio practice, with about 80% of implementation with partners around the world and locally. And very much inspired by the opportunities, but also the constraints of design in that space, I decided to go back to school and did a PhD in management under the guidance of Buchanan at Case Western and a number of scholars in management. So I'll be talking today a little bit from the perspective of design research, but also the management field and that intersection. My presentation outline today is really reflecting a little bit on this question of partnerships in context in the times we are living today, as we heard from Paul and Lorna. Some insights very quickly. I tend to pack my presentations with a lot of slides, so I will highlight things, and I encourage you to seek me out if you have more questions about these studies. And then finally, leaving you with some reflections that hopefully transition us into the debate. So at the risk of restating the obvious, I wanted to zoom out a little bit and state something that everybody in this audience knows. Design research is really coming of age. I think we are at a moment of incredible opportunity, but also risk for a discipline that continues to need to be validated and legitimized in other areas of science and research. This is a time, of course, and I wanted to say that from a formal definition perspective, where I situate a lot of the design research I do is in this area that has a very humanistic perspective. Here's a definition that I like that Buchanan has come up with that really brings design back to what Lorna was saying around the humanistic and the human experience and the messiness of that we inhabit as designers. And from the management perspective, I also like this definition from the scholar Wren, who situates management as an open field of inquiry that really, as we can see today in a very complex world, intersects with many fields, from social innovation to design, but also with big data and policy and entrepreneurship. So these are the two kinds of lenses that I use in my practice and research in design and management. And they come in handy because we are in a moment of breaknecking change, of speed. The fourth industrial revolution, this term that Schwab coined a couple of years ago at the World Economic Forum, really is defining a time where we're seeing systems blur, and where many of the blueprints that we had to think about how we might imagine possible and plural futures, these are blueprints no longer really help us, right? There's a lot of uncertainty. We are failing to adapt to this new normal. And that is having, of course, implications for our institutions, which continue to be outdated in terms of their designs and structures. It has implications for leadership and how we think about boundary spanning and entrepreneurial leaders who will change and carry us through this uncertainty. And this is quite complex and for design research when we think about frameworks of development. And Paul had the SDGs up as an interesting framework, and as flawed as these development frameworks can be, and I'm quite I'm quite embedded in the system of the UN, but also quite critical of it. We can start seeing that there are indicators that are interdependent and are quite difficult to bring apart when we think about change. It's a shift in landscape as a result for design research and for management, and we're really shifting from a linear perspective and mental models of prediction to ones that are much more holistic, but also messy. And that's where systems and a lot of what we teach at Parsons comes in. This is also an interesting time for thinking about design as a field of knowledge, given the fact that the skills and the projections of what will matter to succeed in the world are really changing. And as you can see from this study from the World Economic Forum, as we project forward, concepts like creativity and emotional intelligence are really going up this hierarchy compared to what we used to value before. So as we imagine the jobs of tomorrow, these are the skill sets our institutions in art and design are teaching, and that is a measure of optimism and hope. So how do all these different environmental factors impact a little bit of what I've done in terms and continue to do in my research? I am very interested in this question of social innovation and how design is a catalyst for change in it. It's really been my passion for the last almost 20 years. And the way I think about social innovation, both from a theoretical perspective, but also from the empirical perspective, a lot of research is across 3 dimensions. The concept of novelty, right, bringing something new to the world, the concept of impact, and really having the ability to enhance a social need that may be out there. And finally, and very importantly, the concept of implementation. You do not have innovation only with a novel. You have it when you bring something new to the world that lasts. And we've seen this happen a lot in practices that with colleagues we have been tracking in publications like LEAP. And we see it also in how there is an ongoing question about how we measure the design's impact and what does that mean. And this has been really the key research question that I've pursued for the last few years, the return on design. How do we capture what is unique about what we do? I had the opportunity to study with a couple of scholars, Fred Calliope and Dick Boland, a case that coined this concept of design attitude. And a lot of my research has extended that concept, taking also the work of Kamil Mikluski, who had really observed a lot of the innovation designers produce out in the world in design-fluent institutions like IDEO and Philips. And a lot of my work around measurement through quantitative research has been to isolate dimensions of design attitude, this cognitive mindset that designers have, and be able to very, with a lot of modeling, statistical modeling, take these concepts and show their significance in terms of correlating with impact and concepts like social innovation outcomes, but also team learning and process satisfaction in teams. And that has been exciting because for the first time, we have been able, through some of these studies and some extensions of these studies and field surveys, to start showing that, in fact, when you put designers and design researchers in a team of a transdisciplinary team, especially, we see how these ways of looking at problem discovery have an impact. But we also measure things like user participation. So we know a lot about participatory design, and across these different dimensions, we also see positive significance in how that kind of practice and techniques like prototyping and visualizing can help indeed, can help us produce innovation going forward. So this is a lot of the work my research has kind of focused on, and this is work that continues in other studies. And these days at Parsons, we are working with the team of the Parsons Thesis Lab and Eduardo Stawoski and Camila Buchanan, who is at Lancaster, and we had the pleasure of hosting her this last 8 months, thinking about measurement and mapping across public sector and thinking about what is the investment of design in government and how might we produce high-level data to show that, again, design research and design competencies in government matter. And these are some of the areas we are kind of identifying: questions of procurement, how do you buy design, a little bit of what Lorna was mentioning. What are the kinds of skills that a lot of these government teams are willing to invest in, and why might we care? And then finally, just a lot of work in terms of my research these days lies in institutions. I've had the opportunity to work at UNICEF as an embedded design researcher and ethnographer since 2013, specifically in a division of innovation at UNICEF headquarters in New York that is using technology, the new technology, and these kinds of principles of innovation to change the way we do development and care for the most vulnerable children around the world. And the current study that we're finishing with colleagues at CASE is tracking a venture fund that's very much modeled after a Silicon Valley venture fund that is betting on frontier technologies. So what Lorna was mentioning, AI, machine learning, drones, and they're investing in social entrepreneurs and partnering with social entrepreneurs in tech to think about new modes of delivery in the welfare of children. The international development world, the UN world, has been betting on innovation for some years now, and you can see UNICEF started in 2016 in this kind of ecosystem. And it's an exciting world, but it's a world that is very often devoid of design competencies. So a lot of my research is trying to map the institutional logics that are around, that govern these kinds of innovations, and the cultural determinants that make these organizations change, and also understand how design attitude and a design mindset overlaps with that inquiry mode of innovation. So it's really a deep dive into organizational culture, and questions like risk aversion in the space of development come up, innovation, new technology, and design attitude. So I am running out of time, but just briefly, from the work of Design Matters, I wanted, and this question of partnerships, I wanted to share some insights from 6 years of partnership with one organization in Chile. I am from Argentina, and I'm very fond of working in the global south and in South America. Quanichem is a healthcare institution that takes care of severely burned children and rehabilitation over 20 years that it might take to heal these children. And over several studios, we had the opportunity to have our faculty be embedded in the organization with our students, developing communication projects, really transforming the environment of this clinic, this very inspiring clinic in Santiago. And what was really interesting about that work and partnering through education and design research was to see the amplifying effect that design can have for a partner. So where it's not only what you produce as a design outcome, it's that relational quality of design coming into an organization that was not design fluent and what that can do in terms of that organization moving forward. So finally, some reflections. When we think about partnerships, we have to think about a dialectic and the fact we have to be humble and think about the other side. I think that's key, and that's something we don't do enough from a design perspective, in my view. There are many things in these icons you know around what makes for good design research and good partnerships. But one key takeaway for me is the kind of agency a good design research partnership can produce for the outcomes. So big research questions live in wicked problems, and I think we have a provocation here with this panel around how might we transcend institutional boundaries to partner better, and how might we create new incentives given that our boundaries are more porous, our temporalities are more varied, and our territories have been drastically altered. So thank you very much, and look forward to the debates.
Thanks, Mariana. So I suppose, you've all looked and explored different ways of making impact. And I suppose a lot of the questions coming up, and we'll sort of, after this, we'll move into questions from the floor, but a lot of the questions are about how do we ensure that the research we're undertaking, has a sort of positive impact, and how can we sort of foster and develop communities where we're able to develop I suppose, routes to impact. How can we ensure that what we're doing gets beyond either the sort of the corporate walls or, the sort of the silos of academia? So, Paul, obviously you've been talking about sort of routes of impact a lot with the AHRC piece. Have you got any sort of particular lessons you've learned? Have you looked at any sort of case studies internationally rather than just a UK context?
No, I mean it's challenging enough, I think, just to focus on the UK because it's such a kind of large and growing area. I mean, I think that impact is something that design researchers have never really been afraid to kind of engage with. I think design researchers, practitioners, we always, our kind of raison d'etre is to have impact. If we're developing products, then we want them to be used a lot and sold or to affect change in a positive way. So impact is something that I think is within the kind of toolkit of design researchers. There's a fairly large study by Jeffrey Crossick, which has resulted in an AHRC report, which looks at understanding the value of arts and culture in a kind of UK context. So it articulates comprehensively, I think, the kind of role and the benefit and the impact that design researchers can play in the UK. So not just to provide economic benefit, but to provide other benefits in other areas, for example, in health and well-being, in the sustainable living and enrichment of cities. But also I think that report is really interesting in that it proposes new methods and methodologies for evaluating impact. And I think those new methods and tools and approaches and insights and looking at what impact is and what it means to the UK is starting to have some resonance within other kind of cultures and funding councils in the UK, so that it's not simply all about numbers and quantification.
Lorna, you're obviously working in a doc, and it's a multidisciplinary team, and it's there in a sense as an innovation hub. So it obviously has a sort of, a financial imperative, but you're obviously trying to sort of reach deeper there. How do you try and ensure that the research you're undertaking at the doc has a sort of beneficial impact? And how do you argue for design research within that corporate context?
So, I mean, I think that my experience, and particularly both now at the doc, but also working in healthcare in particular, is that when you design, when you use good research to consider kind of design concepts that are very kind of user-centric, you have to consider frequently they're challenging the established way that something's happening. So, for example, any industry that you design for the user, you may actually be challenging the status quo in that industry. And so the biggest risk to design is that it kind of indexes and optimizes, maybe often for the user they're studying, and forgets the practicality and the pragmatic nature of how industries work. So, for example, we had an experience at Mayo where we developed a really low impact test that patients could do in their home, which was a challenge to the colonoscopy, which is a very unpleasant, and we cannibalized our business. And so we made a proposition back to an organization that we were actually going to make them less money, but actually it was going to be more patient-centric. And so I think you have to understand that when you design and you're optimizing for one user, you often are being destructive to an industry, and you have to think about the cultural pushback you'll get. And so I think impact is, you can really think best case for a user, but you have to think feasibility for an organization, and you have to think about the displacement, like what are you doing to that business? And so I think designers need to be much more fluent in understanding the economics when they're working in a proposition to a client or to an industry is often going to really shift where the power is in that organization, or going to shift where the money goes. And if you don't understand the economics of what you're proposing, you're not going to be able to make it stick. And so I think as much as we want to argue for good design and hope that it has traction and impact, we need to be accountable for understanding our propositions have financial implications. And if you can't speak fluently to why that's still a good thing, then you're not going to be effective as a designer.
Mariana, with the sort of, in terms of sort of impacting that social innovation piece, how as designers do we move beyond just merely trying to sort of demonstrate some empathy and avoid just parachuting in design solutions into sort of non-first world sort of contexts? Because it's,
Yeah, so I think, that's always a very tricky proposition. I think you do it by changing a lot of the infrastructures of our educational institutions. It's been a bit about my modus operandi for the last 20 years in terms of walking this fine rope, because a lot of these social innovation projects and research projects are fantastic for our students, right? They bring a lot of rich learning. But then the question becomes, what is it that we leave behind, right? With these partners that open up their doors in their communities to allow us in. And so a big commitment has to be, in my view, equally ensuring learning outcomes for our students and our researchers, but also thinking about what is it that we're engaging with and what is it that we can create that is not something we give, but something hopefully that catalyzes change and competencies that are already there. We always learn a lot more, I think, sometimes from these projects, from our partners and our communities that we work with than we might be giving. So I think starting from a perspective of humility and being very clear about managing expectations from the onset has been a couple of things that have helped us not parachute.
Right, okay. So we're just going to now move on to, and we're going to hopefully be able to project some of the questions. So hang on, sorry. We've got to. So one of the ones that I wanted to cover off, was about the sort of your statement, Lorna, about design pornography. One of the questions was from the floor was, is that sort of design pornography and this obsession with mapping a result of too much design thinking and not enough design making?
Yeah, it's likely that. I think it's a lot about the commoditization of design when design became, something that we would sell, and the kind of artifacts. I mean, you think about, we've always made maps as part of our thinking process, but we started to kind of pull those maps forward and started to make them into some kind of collateral. So this kind of idea that what we were exchanging. So design became very conspicuous. And so this idea of kind of design is really collaborative, and organizations buy design in, and then they want to learn, they want to design with you. And these artifacts became, trophies of activities, and they started to become part of this value exchange that we had. And so now we often make, I was like joking with someone that, it's only a good service blueprint if you blow up your plotter. I mean, these things are getting so big, you need 5 people to hold them. And there's just this kind of idea of like, that we've made these fetishized parts of design, and it's almost as if we've built some credibility for ourselves by making these really complex maps. If they're not helping you design good solutions, you shouldn't be making that. And so we often over-index in lingering too long in making these things and making them too beautiful and considering they're more valuable than they actually are, and then really getting stuck interpreting, what did they teach you? By making that, what did you learn? And I think we have to really we have to really question our obsession with them.
Yeah. Okay. And this is a question to Paul. Obviously, design's engaging with other disciplines, and you're able to sort of show, I suppose, the impact of that. But what is design when other disciplines start to call themselves designers? I mean, have we sold the family silver?
Oh, yeah, good question. Possibly, in part. But I think there's, the kind of data that we're sifting through at the moment would look to suggest that design researchers are kind of fighting back. So I think perhaps, the kind of design thinking that originated from elsewhere, like business and management, has maybe had a kind of negative effect, I think, on many design research pursuits. But I think there's evidence to suggest that design researchers are now kind of adopting and taking on kind of those leadership roles, and I guess perhaps kind of reclaiming some of that territory that has been lost to other disciplines. I mean, I think that's, from my point of view, that's the kind of strength and also the weakness of design, that it's a very kind of sharing and optimistic and in many cases humble kind of pursuit undertaken by kind of amazing design researchers, and they're kind of happy to give and give and give. And I think from some of the other disciplines that they are perhaps less humble and giving. So I think there's some evidence to suggest that some of the family silver that's been lost has been reclaimed recently.
Okay. And just one of the questions that's come up, and I suppose a lot of you have talked about participatory design, co-creation, and often one of the sort of typical routes to impact is we can sort of start to engage. We're saying, well, look, we did an exhibition, we've mapped the field, but I suppose, how do we go beyond that mapping stage? How do we go beyond the sort of, I suppose, that what can often be purely a sort of a superficial engagement, and how can we actually, start to take responsibility and genuinely make an impact in terms of our design research?
You're looking at me.
Yeah.
So I guess there's lots of different answers. I would propose that you run design as a series of parallel tracks versus it tends to be very exclusively one sequence. And I think design needs to operate back to what I was saying about thinking about the role of research and experimentation. So moving really rapidly into experimentation and to really rigorously documenting the impact of experimentation. So as quickly as possible, getting to actually making and kind of that research and make, so like think, make, really speeding up, accelerating that process, but being very vigilant about what you document. And I think also in addition to doing that is to consider the technology that you are going to have to use to deliver almost any service or product right now, and consider, again, the business implications. And so I think design needs to do good design, but it also needs to be much more fluent in tech, and it needs to really consider economics more. And I think if you run those together and they inform each other, you end up at a place where you can actually show hard data on what your design is going to do. And you don't wait till the end and try and reverse engineer yourself into some rationale. I think you have to build it along the way.
Okay.
I'd kind of add to that and say that I think there has been something of a kind of making turn in recent years, and we've kind of seen that through the kind of rise of conferences like Research Through Design. So I think there's a greater confidence amongst design researchers where we've gone from design thinking to now design making and design acting, and we see it in also Mariana's work through the kind of social innovation work in the DSIS networks. So I think there's a greater confidence. I think we've turned the corner. I think there's still some way to go. And again, I think it's about design researchers feeling kind of better about themselves, more confident about making kind of interventions and making change. And we're kind of seeing that in some of the evidence that we're going through.
Yeah. What I would like to add to that is, not to underestimate the aesthetic power of design and that tangibility of making, right? Mm-hmm. To support what Lorna is saying, what I've observed in my research is as we move into this kind of fourth order design, as Dick would talk about it, of designing more abstract systems and environments and organizations. In non-design fluent organizations, it often is that very concrete, communication piece or product or prototype that unlocks an understanding of the value of design, especially for a non-design researcher, a non-design. So being aware of kind of the, secret power of design and how to play it, both at a very abstract and systems leadership level in an organization, but also in a much more kind of prosaic and pragmatic way, I think is important.
Alex, can I just pick up on one? You mentioned humility, and I think this is something that, from a design perspective, like when we're actually thinking about our role as advocates for users, there's a value in humility. But when you're competing with, when you're back in an industry competing with the kind of tech voice, and so again, this was, personally right now, there's no lack of confidence, like, uber confidence in the tech industry. And I think that the idea of humility is really dangerous in design. If you end up in a room where you talk about soft skills and the kind of gentleness of design when you've got this, tank of technology rolling over humanity. And I think it's really, we have to know where humility, the place for it, but I really think that we get hung up and it's almost like a nice place we go and hide in our humility. You have to build arguments and you have to compete with really loud voices right now. And I would really think design has to really become more robust. And that's why it needs data. It needs to know how to use data and evidence versus just opinion and kind of speculation. I think if we're going to compete with the things that are shaping the world, really compete.
But if it's, and I completely get the sort of the data piece and having to justify things, but certainly, a lot of the design research community or design community as a whole, there is always that balance between having to sort of meet metrics, and often they can be quite reductive. So, is that something that we can balance in terms of, particularly maybe say early career researchers who have a whole series of metrics in a corporate context or an academic context that they've got to deliver certain things, they've got to demonstrate, how their research is making impact. How do we develop a community to support that beyond something like this?
Well, I think it's a perpetual question, right? How might we bridge theory and practice, and what is the power of translational research? And one of the things we see that is very powerful in the field of management, certainly, is this question of, is this mode of researching with mixed methods, right? So where you're bringing quantitative research with qualitative and being able to merge the two and have the one inform the other. I certainly experienced a lot of power from the qualitative insights of design when I was running, very complex multivariate factor analysis statistics. And if I hadn't had that kind of knowledge about design, a lot of the modeling and the quantitative work I would have done would have had no impact whatsoever. We are not training people in design enough to be conversant with mixed methods, the way we are training management people, frankly, to be conversant with those tools like ethnography and grounded theory and all of these other fields of design of research. And that might be one limitation. I also would, I completely agree with what Lorna is saying about the power of technology and this quantitative bias we have to be able to be conversant with. I would also say that there is a lot of power this community has in terms of the skill sets they master, because we can quickly see the limitations of technology. I see it all the time, working with a team at UNICEF that is championing this kind of frontier technology, and often there is very little accountability about the user and about the kind of unintended consequences. Some of these there's a lot of questions up on the screen around diversity in design, and this is a question also that we face in international development perspective, right? It's very nice to talk about tech jargon when you are in Palo Alto, but when you are in Sierra Leone facing an Ebola epidemic, it becomes a different question to deal with. So there's a lot of limitations, again, I think, in technology that from a first world, Eurocentric, North American perspective, we don't always appreciate.
Okay, and I'm conscious that we're sort of just wrapping up shortly. So if I can maybe just ask each of you, in terms of sort of concluding remarks, is there any sort of provocations you have or any questions you want to ask the conference participants to sort of look at or engage with or think about over the coming 2 or 3 days? Paul.
Thank you.
Paul can answer for us.
There are hundreds.
Well, just one.
Well, I'm not going to give you any. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I would just like to add a kind of caveat, really, or a kind of word of caution that, you know, as design researchers, we also have to fight against metrics and the kind of tide of AHRC or any other funder or backer or client or collaborator. So we have to continually contest and challenge the metrics and the kind of ways of doing. And I think that's what the irony is, that's what the likes of AHRC want to see. I think as soon as they kind of detect an algorithmic or formulaic approach from design research, then they will start to kind of fight against that themselves. So I think from the workshops I've been running, the people I've been talking to, and the data that we've been sifting through, and there's large amounts of it, you know, I think design research is in a healthy state. I think the challenges are that we have to, so when we see an increase of almost 100% in design research applications, my main challenge is to try and secure 100% increase in the funding. I mean, the funding for design research in the UK is paltry, you know, in comparison to other disciplines. So I think there are many fights to have. It's about picking the right fights at the right time.
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to be bold. I think, you know, we are at a time where there's incredible urgency, and I think that there is no time to be timid. So be bold in your design research pursuits and go after opportunities that maybe stretch your muscles and put you out of your comfort zone.
I think what would be really refreshing would be to consider the tools that are currently used that are pretty traditional. I think design research typically uses very traditional tools of seeing, and so you end up with traditional insights. I mean, as much as you think about the range of process or method that you use, you're going to return the same results if you use the same methods over and over again. And I would really consider a whole value in designing new research tools and going after, you know, measurement and going after impact and going after understanding tech and the role. I think it's the tools that get used shape the research that you make. So it's as much about designing new tools that then give you that edge, I think, and that take your research into places where it hasn't been, it's like things that are invisible and impossible to study that need to get studied. You might need to build a new tool before you go and kind of try and study those things. So I think that's a design thing, tool building, right? It's what we should be doing. So I think that's the first place to start.
Great. Look, thanks very much. I'm very conscious that with any of these things, that in a sense, this is just an opportunity to kickstart a debate which will hopefully take place as soon as we sort of break for coffee, and we have the opportunity to try to continue some of these conversations. There are a lot of questions that have come up, and you can see some of the things that I think as a community we really need to address, from sort of diversity all the way through to how we're actually going to catalyse design research. So thanks very much, and we look forward to a really, really stimulating 3 days. Cheers.